think we need necessarily to witness to them in the way that we would witness to other people. They're going to continue to reject things all along. They're looking for proof. And all the things that we use, they're not interested in. You know, and if a person's under demonic influence, how do we tell? The longer I've lived and the more I've seen, the more I have come to the conclusion there's more to some of the demonic possession. And be very careful here. A person that's a Christian sometimes is not a Christian, but they're dominated and they're held in captivity by Satan. But that doesn't mean that they don't look good. It doesn't mean that they don't live good. It doesn't mean that they're not nice people, good people. But when you mention Christ to them often, we find out that they hate Christ. They're good people. I have some friends who are Mormon. They're good people. I'm named after a Mormon man, an uncle. Great guy. But lost. And when you begin to mention some things of Christianity, he would become very angry. And you know what? Sometimes we have demonic influence that I don't think we even want to recognize because we don't want to, because the doctors don't accept it. We have self-help programs, and people will say, well, you know, they were effective. Yeah. And if you're not familiar with it, what it says in there, it says those problems that we have, that we need to go to our spiritual entity that we trust. We need to go to that spiritual entity that we trust and ask for help. Well, wait a minute, we've just opened up the box to go to Buddha, to go to Islam, to go to so many different sources. And often when they're directed towards Christ, they immediately become angry. And that came from a man who was working with some of the 12-step programs, and he said it was always fascinating because sometimes when you suggested Christ or you bring up Christ, you either get tears or you get anger. And quite frequently, they got the anger. You know what? Do you believe we're in a spiritual battle? Do you really? Do you really believe that Christ, or that Satan is real? He's not imaginary. He's here. His demons are working against you. I know some of the pictures and so forth we see, they make it so difficult for us to get a grasp on what Satan is really like. He's not ugly. He doesn't have a red suit. He doesn't have a pointed tail. He doesn't have horns. He's the greatest creation of God next to man. I don't understand all the battles in heaven. I can't answer all the questions, but I know this. We need to be very careful with Satan. He's the guy that can preach smooth. He's the guy that I have a good friend of mine, and I'm certainly not saying he is, but I said, Larry, you always remind me of some of the preachers who are so smooth and so false, because he had just preached on it in a fellowship meeting. He said, why are you saying this? That's why you got that hairline. I said, you got too much hair. You comb it, you're so smooth. I said, you get it professionally done. Just like Satan. I was giving him a hard time. But you know what the reality of it is? That's the way Satan is. He's smooth. He's supple. He's one that you don't recognize until all of a sudden you're trapped. And be careful just assuming that because somebody seems to fit the picture that they do. How many combatants or how many sides are in this battle? You know what? In all honesty, there's only two religions in the world. Works and grace. Works and grace. Works where you say, I get to heaven because of what I've done, and grace because we know I'm going to heaven only because of the grace of God and no other reason. And I met him personally. Can you remain neutral? Well, from what Jesus has said going back to the lesson, the verses that we looked at today for what Jesus is saying there, we can't be neutral. You're either with me or against me. You either scatter or you gather. And you have to make a choice. No, Pastor, I want to just stay out of the fray. You can't stay out of this one. It can be anything from prayer, working with kids and teaching them. But sooner or later, some of the things that we do are going to bring about a response from the world that's not going to be pleasant. We're already seeing it in places around the world. But we need to understand we're here. Paul writes in Ephesians chapter 6, he says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." When you take a look at that, you realize very clearly, I either go with Christ or I go with the devil. But I have to make a choice. I have to make a choice. And I hope and pray two things. For those who are here this morning who are not Christians, if you know for sure or not know for sure where you would go if you were to die, you need to come this morning and see how you can make that certain. These things are written that you may know the Son of God. These things are written that you may know that you have salvation. It's not hard to become a Christian. It's easy. It's the acceptance of a gift that was given on a cross 2,000 years ago. And there's other people that you look and say, I'm fearful of death. I fear death. I fear being a martyr. I fear all these things. Reality of it is, I would say to you, if you're not afraid of dying, you have to be kind of a fool. Reality is very simple. Dying is not normally pleasant. I've heard people tell me that so-and-so had a beautiful death. That's the enemy of Christ, Satan, who's taken that person from us. It's the enemy of Christ who brings us down and gives us pains and aches and pains of old age. And finally brings us to our death. In fact, in 1 Corinthians 15, it is the last enemy to be destroyed is death. It is something that very clearly we're in a battle. I hope and pray this morning that you'll think about where you're at. You might say, I'm too old to do anything. We are never too old to pray. We are never too old to minister to other people. We are never too old to pass out tracts and do other things. And I hope that you'll see that. I appreciate you being with us today. And I appreciate the time we've had. And I don't know for how much longer this will go, but I pray and ask that you continue to give your support. We need the prayer, and we need ideas. Please, prayer, ideas, things that would improve things, we need. And I ask it in Jesus' name, that we would see the power that we have with us, and that we would grasp who we are in Christ's name. We are the soldiers of Christ. Father, help us to see the reality. Help us, Father, to see the things, Father, where we're so lacking. To see, Father, the things that control us, dominate us. And I ask in prayer, Father, that you search people's hearts and minds. And Lord, there's things that they need to come and talk about, that they would come this morning. We thank you and we praise you, Father, for all that you've given and done. And we ask it in Jesus' name.